This is a story of how one picture on Instagram cost me 333 people to unfollow me in one day. If you've been following me for a bit, you've known that I have been starting to feel a little bit burnt out in terms of doing mountaineering objectives, backpacking objectives, climbing objectives. I think there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, I've made it my job. And while I am super, super thankful for this, I do think that because I need to make money off of the content that I put out, it has me second guessing a lot of things. So some of the fun is taken away from it there. The second thing has been an accident from that happened to one of my buddies where he passed away on Mount St. Helens. That was one of the more closer people to me that I knew that was really big in the mountain community that I never thought that I would happen to. He ended up passing away. Those two things have been happening this year, which has kind of led me down a different path with what I want my content to be. Now, that being said, I'm never going to not do backpacking and hiking and bike packing and climbing content and mountaineering content. It's just that probably my uploads for that and the things that I talk about with that are going to be a little bit fewer and farther in between. I still have two really, really big goals that I want to do before I do something like start a family. And that would be to number one, complete climbing all of the 58 Colorado 14ers and then climb the tallest peak in North America, which is Denali. I'm on 27 of the 58 14ers in Colorado. And the last one that I just did, which was Capitol Peak, was what a lot of people consider as one of the sketchiest ones. So I'm happy to have that one completed. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm about halfway done with that. And then Denali will be a big endeavor. But after those two things, I think my life might change a little bit. And the photo that I posted, or actually it was a carousel, hinted kind of towards that change in niche for me. So let's talk a little bit about how this photo came up. Being a Wyoming resident this year, being legally a Wyoming resident, I decided to apply for hunting tags. Now, what a lot of people don't know about me is that I actually moved out west originally a decade ago from the Midwest because I wanted to get into backpack hunting. I remember seeing all these people on these outdoor shows glassing bucks and deer and just having these grand adventures. And that's what I wanted to have on public land. Now, when I first moved there, it was a lot of hunting. But then I started getting away from that. I started to move towards a little bit more of jujitsu. And then from jujitsu, it was a lot more into backpacking. And from backpacking, it was content creation and more backpacking and then mountaineering and then climbing. So everything has kind of led me down a path, one thing to another. The great thing is that a lot of these activities parallel each other. So the things that I have learned from ultra running, for example, I can take into something like hunting in the future or mountaineering or whatever it is that I want to get into because everything's encapsulated into the outdoors. A lot of that stuff is very parallel. So with that, I love that part of it. Now, what has happened recently though is after I applied for these tags, for these hunting tags, well, let me back up. Before I started to apply for these hunting tags, I've been starting to feel more of an itch towards hunting. Like I said, I got away from it for at least the last 4 to 5 years. I used to bow hunt quite a bit. I used to do a lot of hunting, and I got away from it a lot. And a lot of that I'm realizing now was a part of the environment that I was in. I was surrounded by a lot of hunters. I don't mean it by that way. I mean by I was living in coastal Oregon, and I did not like that terrain at all. I didn't like to hunt it. I didn't like to look at it. I didn't like to hike through it. I hated it. It was so thick. It was just a green canopy. I hated it. And so that was the closest hunting to me. And so that's really all that I knew for a decade. Once I moved out to Laramie, I realized how much more I loved the high plains and being able to see further distances. I always kind of knew that, but being out here now in the autumn and in the fall, I'm really realizing how much I love it. So anyway, last year when I was my full year in Wyoming, I ended up being a resident so I could apply for tags, get them at the resident rate. And I applied for a couple. And my first tag that was due up was an antelope tag. So my whole idea with this was I wanted to get back into more of a self-sufficiency mode. So when I'm doing hunting, when I'm doing climbing, when I'm doing ultra running, I think it's great, but a lot of times I ask myself, let me back up. I When I first got into all that stuff, it was exhilarating and I loved it. And I still love it. I love it, love it, love it. After the death of my buddy, I've been asking myself more of like, what is the point of that stuff? Okay. Who really cares if I am able to get to the top of a peak or not? Who really cares if I do the 58 14ers? What's been more important to me recently is being able to provide for a future family or being able to provide for the girlfriend that I'm with right now. And the way that I like to do that, besides, you know, financially in some cases, is also being able to provide food. I think it's the most primal thing that you can provide to somebody as a man. And that's really what led me back down to the path of hunting. And so I got this, and to one thing with what's the point of things and who cares about things. I think the thing that has been driving me and that is going to keep driving me with completing these 14ers as well as Denali is I don't want to be an insignificant person. I saw this. I was actually reading the I know this podcast is going a whole different ways, but this is very therapeutic for me right now. I was actually reading this biography on General Grant. It's huge. It's like 1,000 pages. I'm about 120 pages in right now. General Grant was the Union general. Actually, I don't know because I haven't been that far in the story, but he was for the Union in the Civil War. And he's got a really, really interesting story of being a really insignificant person, in a sense, to being a very significant part of history. And one of the things that I just read last night was he was talking to a guy and he felt pity for him because he was such an insignificant person. And that hit me. I read that a couple times, then I took a picture of it because that is why I think I do run 100 miles. That's why I climb Mount Rainier. That's why I do a lot of this stuff, is because I don't want to be seen as insignificant. I don't want to go into the grave. I bike past the graveyard all the time on the way to the gym. I don't want to go to the grave feeling like, or just not being remembered. That's scary to me. So I think that's why I do a lot of these bigger goals that nobody can deny you of. Yes, you got to the top of this. Yes, you completed this checklist, whatever. But on the other side of the coin, I like to be able to provide. I like to be self-sufficient. I like to be healthy. And one of the best ways that I know to do that is to hunt for my food. The feeling that you get when you harvest an animal is unlike anything else. And you are forever inexorably linked to that environment, to that place and time, to that animal. And then that just goes on for as long as you retain their meat and their like skull, if that's something that you're going to retain. And you're providing for the people in your life that you love. So that's the most alluring thing to me. When I picked up this antelope tag, it was the first time I had hunted antelope. I took it very seriously. I did a lot of scouting in the summer. I did a lot of shooting in the summer. And it was something that I really, really wanted to get done. On the third day of a hunt, I was able to be successful with it and had to have about a 2-mile pack out carrying the entire antelope on my back, all the meat. Well, that I quartered out anyway. And when I got back home, I had to put it in a cooler, and I let it, what do they call it? Dry or wet age, essentially, because it was in ice for the next 5 days or so. And then I took it out and I started cutting it up and wrapping it and putting it into meat. Now, during one of those times there, I uploaded a photo or a carousel of my antelope hunt with my antelope. And the first picture of it was me with the antelope, but it's not one of those grip and grin photos that most people get when they harvest an animal. I don't think that that's a good taste, especially for folks that are on the fence, and I think it gives ammo for non-hunters. And so I don't want to partake in a photo like that. So none of my photos were like that. It was showing the animal laying on the ground, obviously passed away, my hand on it, showing the respect that it deserved. And then the subsequent photos were me removing the meat from the animal, packing it out, and then ultimately eating it. I wanted to educate my audience on how this happens. That hunters don't just end up shooting something and then never retrieving it. Or, well, I mean, sometimes that happens if they're wounded, but in most cases, they're going to get there and then they take the meat. I think a lot of people just think that people hunt for trophies and they don't do anything with the meat. No, people hunt for meat, and that is my number one reason why I'm hunting. I currently have a cow elk tag. I'm going to be leaving here in the next couple hours to have an evening hunt. And I don't care. I don't care how, like, that's the thing is I don't care the antler size. I don't care the whatever. I'm not obsessed with these vanity metrics. Now, maybe later on in my hunting career, I will. Because I don't want it to be to where my mind never changes. But like right now, I do not care. I will harvest a cow and have a lot of really good tender meat for the next year. And the next year I would be happy to do that again. I'm not out for antlers. I am just simply out to create food. Now, not only did we pack and wrap that meat, but we also created jerky out of it. I got myself a dehydrator. I made jerky and I made also hamburger. So I'm actually eating a soup right now that's got the antelope hamburger. And I love being able to provide this to the girlfriend that I'm living with right now and to be able to feed my body with this really, really healthy, like the healthiest meat you're going to find really on planet Earth. Now, as far as the picture goes, the responses to this really surprised me. And I think there was a lot. So in the picture, I also included a description. So here's what I put. So I hesitated to post this on my Instagram, but I do believe that if good people do nothing, then the negative narrative surrounding hunting will never change. And that is a big thing that's been in my mind. And that's why I feel like I've been a coward with this, is because I've wanted to upload hunting content for a few years now, but I knew it didn't make sense with my brand. So I didn't do it. And I think that does hunting a disservice because of the fact that, well, we'll read on here, but of the fact that I got so many positive messages thanking me for this post and this description from people that were on the fence about it. And I think me not posting about it does a disservice to us as hunters and really the truth. Like, I think that I had to tell the truth about how I felt about this because I had been hiding it for so many years. So I said, in my opinion, hunting is the ultimate form of being able to provide for yourself by not relying on the store to provide your meat. There's nothing more organic and fulfilling than harvesting an animal and processing it yourself. My goal is to only be eating wild game for my red meat in the coming years and never having to rely on the store for my meat. As we speak, this meat is aging in the cooler for the next 7 days before I begin to process it for myself. I just brought a dehydrator to make jerky and a grinder to make burger. In other words, I'm a total meat hunter. I'm not the best hunter in the world, and I do not care how many points my animals will score. It's all about the meat for me. I also believe that to become a total outdoorsman, you need this skill in your toolkit. And that is something as well. I feel like I have learned the rope work of climbing. I feel like I've learned how to survive in the mountains in the snow and all this type of stuff. But I really need to brush up my skills on learning about animals, hiking off trail a lot more, being able to shoot a rifle, all of these things that I think a total outdoorsman should be. And that's kind of more what I'm leaning towards. I don't want to be just an ultra marathoner. I don't want to be just a mountaineer. I want to be a total outdoorsman, that when somebody thinks of an outdoorsman, like, they think of me, right? Like, that's what I want my brand to be. He can do everything out in the woods. He's not the best hunter. He's not the best mountaineer, but he can do all of these things. And that's what prevents me from getting bored with things and also makes me a lot happier because I'm constantly learning. For more context of this harvest, I check out my stories because I want to break the narratives that all hunters are lazy. This hunt was on public land that anybody can recreate on, and the animals are free to roam. It ended with me packing out the animals' quarters on my back, total pack weight around 70 pounds, ? 1.5 miles up and down ridges to get back to my car. A very short and easy pack out compared to an elk I packed out in the coastal range of Oregon a couple years ago. I know I will lose followers over this, but in my heart, it's the right thing to support, and it's been on my mind for a long time. Keep building, Chad. So, like I said, I had a ton of positive remarks from this. I mean, it had almost 2,000 likes, which is pretty rare for a carousel for me. It had, let's see how many comments. It had 295 comments, and I would say 90% of those were very positive. Now, I did have a lot of blowback from either vegans or non-hunters or whatever, and that's understandable. I'm not trying to change their mind about it. I know that I feel good when I eat meat. I don't feel good when I don't eat meat. So I'm not going to change their mind on it, but the people I did want to change the mind were people on the fence about hunting. And so I wanted to paint it in a good light. And so that's just me saying that from here on out, that's probably what more of my content, well, there will be more of that in my content without a doubt. And so while I won't ever forget and I won't ever stop uploading backpacking, hiking tips and all that type of stuff, I am going to bring it into the full circle of being an outdoorsman. And that's what I want this channel to be. I've always wanted to have a cabin. I've always wanted to be self-sufficient. In fact, I don't have the cabin photos hanging in here, but I have two out in my living room of two cabins that I always look at every single day because I want that. I want to be self-sufficient. I would love to do like solar power for my electricity. I would love to get my own rainwater. I would love to of two cabins that I always look at every single day because I want that. And I think all of the stuff that I've done in the outdoors has led me to this point to where I'm starting to gather all the necessary skills I need for everything in order to do this. So that's going to be my content moving forward. It's not going to be just hunting. It's not going to be just mountaineering, but there is going to be little bits and pieces sprinkled in with all of that type of stuff. So hope you guys enjoy. If you guys like this, or if you like this podcast, please like and subscribe on YouTube. Give a 5-star on Spotify, and I'm out.